This film is just the most recent example of how can I capture a sense of curiosity and remind people that even though our country is still a work in progress, and even though we were built and put together by imperfect men, how can we still find a way to genuinely feel proud of who we are and grateful for what's been done on our behalf? How do we celebrate?
Now, in terms of the movie, you have these stories from everything you've done. How did you pick the ones that you wanted to show in the movie?
The headlines every day right in front of us. Our country doesn't know what to stand for anymore. You know, we're confused, not just about the difference between left and right, but between American and anti-American. And so I just thought, I mean, there are probably 24 stories in that library about people who had an affirmative hand in shaping the country we have. So I picked the 9 that I thought were most impactful and put them in an order that I thought made sense, and then stitched them together. I drove to D.C. in an old Bronco and visited the monuments and memorials that had been built to honor the people in the stories. That's what the movie is. It's not a documentary, although it's filled with history and information. And, you know, it's not an epic narrative. There are probably 300 actors in it, but they don't talk to each other. They're just there to bring the stories I tell on an empty stage to life. And so what comes out the other end is unique. I think I hadn't seen anything like it anyway.
Yeah, but your heart in all of this. I mean, you've dedicated yourself to telling these stories about people who are working towards to help everyone and working hard and and then the military. And so what was your heart? Is this something that you always knew you wanted to do growing up? What was kind of the spur for you?
Yeah, I mean, regarding the movie, I realized a few years ago that I've been doing the same show for like 30 years. I just changed the title every 8 or 9 years. Dirty Jobs, somebody's got to do it, returning the favor, the way I heard it. These are all attempts to tap the country on the shoulder and say, what about her? What about him? Get a load of that, right? And you can do that in the skilled trades. I've certainly tried to do it. Dirty Jobs was not just skilled trades. That was anybody who worked hard for a buck, anybody who helped us keep the lights on. So all of those different projects underneath it was just me trying to find a different way to I was going to say reconnect people to things that matter, but that sounds a bit haughty. The truth is, it began as a way for me to reconnect myself to things that I had become disconnected from. And if you look back at the early days of Dirty Jobs, that's really what the show was. I was 42, 43 years old when that thing went on the air. And I'd worked in Hollywood for 15, 20 years. And I had become disconnected from some stuff that was real important to me growing up, where my food came from, where my energy came from, right? Just the basic appreciation for the miracle that happens when I flick the switch and the lights come on, or when I flush the toilet and the crap goes away. Like, these are miracles, And I was gobsmacked by all that when I was a kid, growing up next to my granddad, a man who could build a house without a blueprint, but who only went to the 7th grade. That stuff was always top of mind for me. And my dad, he was a history teacher, and he was super passionate about making sure his sons understood the price that had been paid and the people who had come before. So, I was very lucky. I had a front row seat to 2 families, my grandparents and my folks, who lived next to each other on this little farm out of the way north of Baltimore. And I was real connected for a long time to stuff that mattered, and then I wasn't, because Hollywood will do that to you. And then by the time Dirty Jobs came along 20 years ago, that all of this began as a very personal kind of selfish, if I'm being honest, attempt to just reacquaint myself with the stuff that matters. Happily, there was an audience for it, and that audience grew and they became engaged. And so this film is just the most recent example of all of that coming to fruition. How how can I capture a sense of curiosity and remind people that even though our country is still a work in progress, and even though we were built and put together by imperfect men, how can we still find a way to genuinely feel proud of who we are and grateful for what's been done on our behalf, and uh, joyous? How do we celebrate it? Right? That's what the movie is fundamentally. It's a celebration.
And I think it's a perfect time for it because, after COVID, I think people reevaluated what really was important, right? And so like these things like homeschooling and homesteading are really like on a rise because people realize like, the day to day and being with your family and, working the land and everything. And so I love that you've always kind of stood up for those things and kind of appreciated people for that. So
Well, privilege, right? I mean, listen, I'm interested in talking to anybody who shares my addiction to chewing and swallowing, hot and cold running water, um, indoor plumbing, smooth roads. These these are things, never mind the movie. These are things that Democrats, Republicans, liberals, and conservatives can all look at and say, yeah, I need that stuff in my life. And yes, I am grateful to have it, and I do appreciate the people who make it possible. That's where it starts for me. Where things get political and tricky is, all right, now let's talk about our founders. Let's talk about these people whose ideas were so far ahead of their time and so bold, but who were nevertheless flawed and human. Are we going to be able to accept the virtue with the vice, or are we going to tear down their memorials and vandalize their statues because they did a thing at a time, and we just simply can't deal with it 160 years later? How are we going to handle that? What are we going to stand for? What are we not going to stand for? You know, two different ways really of asking the same question.
now I know you said, the percentage is going down on people who are kind of like pro America. But in your eyes, do you feel like people who are still that are very passionate about it, kind of even more feel like, oh, we need to stand up for America?
Well, I think patriotism by definition is passionate. You can't be blasé and be a patriot, um, right? So I think I think the bigger issue today is that we hear a lot about the divide between left and right and conservatives and Democrats, liberals, so forth. I I really think that there are still some things that people on both sides of the aisle can stand for and celebrate and feel grateful for and be proud of. So, if this movie had a riddle, it was find out what those things are and then tell stories around those virtues in a way that's entertaining. Because look, you guys know this. You see a lot of movies. Nobody wants a lecture. Nobody wants a sermon. Nobody wants a lesson. You know, filmmakers and artists and writers, I think, we want to make a point. We want to own a position. We want to move the needle and make people think and all these different things. But the trap is you can't just come out of the gate and expect to do that. You have to entertain them. You have to tell a story. And as long as you stay true to that, once people like you, assuming you're lucky enough to have some people like you, then they'll listen, then they'll let you connect the dots. So this is a mainstream movie, we'll be in 1,200 theaters, and You know, the last thing in the world I want to do is come out with some sort of very important message around a film whose time has come. You know, it's no, 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 come on. It's a movie, and if it's entertaining, awesome. And if there's a message underneath it, better still. But chronology matters. If they're entertained and if they got lost in the stories, then I would hope what they leave the theater with is maybe a heightened sense of gratitude. And I say that not because I think we owe that to our forefathers and mothers, although I do. I do think gratitude is a kind of debt that that we should pay. But the real reason I hope that happens is because, speaking only for myself, I can't feel sorry for myself when I'm feeling grateful. I I can't feel like a victim when I'm feeling a sense of gratitude. I can't I can't feel bitter when I'm feeling grateful, right? So that is one of the great virtues. And what makes it great, this sense of gratitude, is that it's attainable to everyone. It's a choice. It's like work ethic or delayed gratification. It's a conscious choice that we get to make. And if we make it, in my experience anyway, life gets a whole lot easier to live.
You came to the Movie Guide Awards because we're an advocate for what you're doing. So, how does it make you feel that you have this audience kind of behind you?
Well, I mean, obviously it's flattering and humbling. I went to the Movie Guide Awards because you guys just started writing really nice articles about me based on stuff that I was posting. And I'm like, well, who the heck is Movie Guide? And I kind of peeled that back and met Ted and so forth and so on. I'm like, oh, I kind of like what you guys are all about. So look, it feels great. I've been so lucky over the years to have engaged audiences, like Dirty Jobs didn't have the biggest audience in the world. It was big, but mostly they were engaged. And that show was sponsored, not sponsored, but programmed by the viewers. All the ideas came from the viewers. It was the viewers who really hosted it, so to have a level of engagement. Facebook's the same way. There's 7 million people there, and they care about my foundation. They care about the business of elevating the trades, and they care about this movie. So that's the privilege. It's not just to work or to find an audience, but it's to work with people who they care and can tell you why.
It's going to be fine.
If you enjoy videos that follow your values like ours and you want to help us continue, go to movieguide.org/donate, because we're actually a nonprofit. You may not know that, but we're working in Hollywood every day to help families have more choices that follows their values. And also subscribe right now.